most amazing artist. I hope you are having a great day today. Today is week 2 of our Thiebaud pies. And last week, what we were supposed to do was to do just a light sketch of our pies. You should have 3 all together. You could have done more, but you needed at least 3, and you needed at least 1 whole pie, at least 1 slice of pie, and at least 1 pie with a slice cut out of it. And it was your choice what kind of pies you wanted to make. And we were just trying to get our composition down. Composition is the way that you arrange your artwork. Okay, so this is how I decided to arrange my pies, but maybe you chose to do something different with your sketch. Today, we are going to start coloring our pies, and we're gonna do a really fun technique with markers. We are actually going to use markers, and we're going to turn these washable markers into paint. It's really important if you want to do this technique that you have washable markers. Crayola markers are usually always washable. This will not work with permanent markers though. They have to be washable. So if you're going to do this technique, you will need, of course, washable markers, a little bit of water, and a paintbrush is actually optional. You don't have to have a paintbrush. You can actually use your finger in place of your paintbrush. So whatever I do today with my paintbrush, you will instead do with your finger if you do not have a paintbrush at home. If you don't have markers, then you can just use crayons. You could do colored pencils. Whatever materials you have at home will work. I like this because it is great for layering. We're going to do our first layer today, and then next week we're going to do another layer until we build up enough color to make these pies look almost realistic. If you are going to be doing this watercolor technique with markers, then it's a good idea to put a messy mat under your work so that you don't get any mess on your table. And that's pretty much everything you're going to need today, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just start coloring in parts of my pies. And down here I have chosen to make this one a pumpkin pie. So my main color is going to be orange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the outside edge first, and I'm just going to start coloring. Now we don't have to fill in every single little white space. You can have some white spaces showing, because once we put the water on top of this marker, it will turn into paint and it'll start bleeding into any white spaces that you have. Okay, and I'm just going to do a little bit at a time. I'm going to go over on this side too, and I'm just going to start putting my marker color where I want it. I'm going to avoid my crust because my crust is going to be a brown color. It's not going to be orange. And if we're thinking of value is the lightness or darkness of a color in art. When I think of a pumpkin pie, it's not just orange. It has some shadows and it has some highlights. So I'm actually going to add those by using different colored markers. Okay, so it's mainly orange on my pumpkin pie, and I almost forgot I need to also come down here and put some orange right there, because this is the cross section of my pie. It's where you will see in the inside. And I'm just going to put a little bit of orange all the way up to my whipped cream. And as you can see, I'm leaving quite a bit of white space because I know once I put this marker on top, it should turn into paint. Now I don't want to lose those lines, those pencil lines that I drew last week, so I'm actually going to take a brown, because I'm going to use a brown as my shadow. And I'm going to go ahead and just outline that part of my pie. The crust too, because my crust is going to be brown. So I'm going to outline it with my brown marker. Also want to use brown as a shadow, so I'm going to just lightly color a little bit of brown over top of my orange right at the top of it, up here next to the crust, because that's where I want my shadows to be. So I'm just going to do a little bit of marker right there. And I want it to be a bit lighter up towards my whipped cream, so I'm going to add some yellow. And that yellow and that orange will mix together, and it will make a beautiful tertiary color called yellow orange. I am layering these on top of one another because I want those colors to blend together. If it looks like this, where it's just orange and then all of a sudden it turns to yellow, it's not going to blend as well as if you were to go over top of it just a little bit with your orange and your yellow. Layer those colors so that they will mix together. So now that I have my colors laid out, I am going to go ahead and grab my water, and like I said, if you don't have a paintbrush, then you can do this step with your finger. And I'm just going to take the water and I'm going to start painting it on top of that marker that I just put down on my paper. And it's going to start getting those colors blended together. That marker is going to start bleeding into any white space that I missed. And like I said earlier, this is just the first layer. So we're just doing the first layer today, and next week we'll go back in and make the shadows a little bit darker if we have to, and make our colors brighter. This technique is amazing whenever you start layering. However, you have to let this painting dry in between your layers. If it's not dry, then you can't add any more layers on top. So that's why we're gonna split it into 2 weeks, adding these layers of colors. I'm gonna go over here. I don't know if you noticed, but my paintbrush is following the direction where my marker went. My marker is going vertical up and down, so that's how my paintbrush went. I did not go horizontal like this, because then all this brown will actually come all the way down here, and we don't want that. We want the darkness to stay up here where the shadow is. So whenever you're adding your water, make sure that you are following the same lines that you drew with your marker. Okay, I'm gonna go over my crust now. And that makes a beautiful light tan color up there. And whipped cream is typically white, so I'm just going to use a gray marker. And that's gonna act as the shadow on my whipped cream. And when I go over it with water, I'm gonna take just a little bit of water, because this is a tiny little section here. And I still want to leave some of that white because I want there to be a nice highlight on my whipped cream. So I'm just taking the tiniest amount of water and going around that gray line that I just drew to turn it into paint, just like the rest of my painting. Next week, when we add our second layer, we will be able to darken this up a little bit and get those lines a little bit more defined, and we can make our colors more vibrant. All right, I'm gonna move on to my blueberry pie here, and I'm gonna do the same thing. With my crust, I want it to be brown, so what I'm gonna do is I'm first just gonna outline or go over those pencil lines that I've already drawn with my brown color. Don't forget the outer crust as well. And I'm just gonna lightly color that in. Remember, we don't have to color in all the little white spaces, because when we add water on top of this, it will start blending into each other. And actually, the more color that you add, the darker that section of your pie will be. So I'm actually gonna try to color in most of these small squares, because they're actually behind these vertical strips of crust. And since they're behind those pieces of crust, then this part of our pie is going to be a bit darker than these top pieces. So I just colored the top pieces in very lightly because I want them to be a lighter color, and I want these back pieces, or the pieces that are behind the front pieces, to be a bit darker, so I'm going to color them in a little bit more. Okay, and this is a blueberry pie, so I'm going to do a mixture of blue and purple, because if we think of blueberries, they're not really this bright of a blue color. They're actually more of a blue-violet color. So I'm gonna mix these two together to get my blueberries. And I wanna see some of that blueberry texture. So I'm actually gonna do scribbles, just like I did with my pencil, with my sketch, because I don't want it to be just a flat color. I wanna be able to see those like blueberry texture that you would see in an actual blueberry pie. It wouldn't just be of one flat color. You would see some highlighted areas, some darker areas of the blueberry filling. So as you can see, I'm doing this pretty fast because I don't have to fill in that entire space. And go over top of it with the blue. And I did just get some in the brown, my blue inside the brown. Try your best not to do that. So I think I need to slow down a little bit because I don't want to mix the blue with the brown. All right, I've colored in that pie, so now I can go in with my paintbrush and my water. I want to make sure that it's clean because I don't want to get any orange in my blueberry pie. And I'm going to take the water and just lightly brush it over where I put the marker. And again, my paintbrush is going in the same direction as my marker did. So I went vertical with my marker on these parts of my pie. So when I add the water, I'm also going to be adding it vertically. And if you are using a paintbrush, then you need to remember that your paintbrush is like a ballerina dancer. She likes to stand on her tippy toes, my friends. Please do not squish her little tippy toes because then you're gonna break them. Her tippy toes are right here, by the way. You're gonna break her little tippy toes and then you won't be able to use a paintbrush anymore, okay? So take care of your paintbrush. And now I am going in those sections behind these vertical pieces of crust, and I'm adding water just to those sections back there. And as you can see, they're much darker than the front sections because I added a little bit more color back there. The more color you add, the darker your color will be. And the less color that you add, the lighter it will be. And I'm doing it small sections like this at a time because I really don't want to mix my brown with my blueberry filling, okay? So just do it one section at a time. You definitely don't want to just brush across this whole thing because then you're going to mix the blue and the purple and the brown all together and it would look just like a big old mess. So take your time and go in one section at a time with your colors. So if each section's a different color, just do it one section at a time so then you don't blend all those colors together when you don't want them to be blended. All right, the crust is done, and don't worry too much if you go outside the lines a little bit. That's totally fine. It will happen. No worries at all. Just like with my crust, I'm going to do my blueberries just one section at a time. And these are teeny tiny sections, so I really don't need that much water. If you add too much water to small sections, then it will start to bleed into your other sections. So just be careful about that. And I have finished with my blueberry pie, well, just the first layer anyways. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same exact thing for my cheesecake, and then I'll be right back and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, I just finished doing my cheesecake, and the way that I did that was I actually just used brown and a little bit of yellow, because if you think of a cheesecake, it's kind of like this yellowy beige kind of color. I recommend while you're doing this or even before you do this, use another piece of paper and kind of test and see what colors will look like when they're mixed together. So I did a little test before I did it on my final piece of paper and I thought it came out pretty good. Like I said earlier, this is just the first layer. Next week, we're gonna darken up the shadows a little bit more and make our colors a little bit more vibrant. You have to be really careful around the tiny details like I did over here on my blueberry pie. On my cheesecake, my cherry, the red and the green, wanted to bleed into my actual cheesecake color. So I had to be very careful and just add a little bit of water at a time to those smaller details. And like I said, if your paint or your colors start to mix together where you don't want them to, just dry your paintbrush off on your messy mat or a paper towel and just pick it up carefully, gently with your paintbrush. And on my cherry, it did bleed a little bit, and I'm not too worried about it because I know that next week I am going to neaten this up a little bit, make those shadows darker, and make my colors a lot brighter. This was just the first layer today, so after you finish your first layer, let it dry so then you are ready for next week. I hope you guys have a lot of fun adding color using this marker technique, or if you just use crayons or colored pencils, I hope you had fun either way. I can't wait to see how your pies are turning out. I know they're going to be amazing because you guys are amazing. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.